Hey, this is Joel Hoekstra of Whitesnake and Trans-Siberian Orchestra, and you're listening to Wildman and Steve.
You are about to listen to the intersection of faith, talk, and music. The Wildman and Steve show starts right now.
Steve, I'm always wondering about how to start off because, you should we say, welcome to the Wildman and Steve show? Because, you listen to a show and you get tired of hearing that because the promo already said who we are. The introduction and the bumper already said who we are. So what would be the point of me saying it again?
There would be no point, but then again, we often have no point. So what's your point?
Yes. Well, okay. Well, thank you. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Wildman and Steve show. Thank you. Now, I wanted to just brief our fans a bit. Those of you who are able to watch by video, those of you who can see me, I have everything behind me on this shelf. I'm calling this the Wildman Collection Shelf. Now, basically what this is I am trying to reconstruct my collection from the 1980s. I had cassettes a whole huge box of cassettes of everything, right? And as a lot of us did as we got older, I'm not sure if I'm going to need that. And then before you know it, hey, where's that cassette? Where's this? So I'm trying to reconstruct everything. So as we talked about last time, I have two booklets here and different bands that I listen to. But the big one right here there's two big ones I wanted to point out. The first one is a Christmas gift to me. 1987 original vinyl Petra, This Means War. Now, the people that got that for me, they knew me very well, wouldn't you say? They knew exactly what I would like. And I remember opening it. I thought, this is insane that, these things, no matter what vinyl, these original vinyls go for very high prices, and they were able to get it for me. And so that was great. And so there's this whole Wildman collection I'm building that I want to touch on in at least a few seconds in each episode. However, there's one thing I want to point out today that if you see over here to the left of me is the Life edition of Van Halen. And, you and I have talked about this, Steve, about what we used to listen to. And when I was in high school, I heard a lot of Van Halen, but I wasn't allowed to listen to a lot of Van Halen. The only thing I could listen to was Christian, but I loved it. But I do find it interesting, the impact that Eddie had on just about probably every guitarist since 1978 when he came out with Eruption.
Everybody.
Yeah, everybody. I mean, and the guitarists who say that they weren't influenced by him, number one, are either lying or they don't realize that the guitarists that they were influenced by him. Or
they're in Justin Bieber's band.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, we need to edit that part out, folks. So we might have some Justin Bieber fans that are,
I seriously doubt that.
Yeah,
I seriously doubt that we have any Bieber fans.
Some people are out there saying, no, I don't listen to the Wildman and Steve show. No, and then they're in the corner with the headphones, don't want anybody to see. But anyway, I wanted to put that out there for a couple of reasons. Number one, you cannot in any way, as a musician, especially as a guitarist, you cannot discount the influence that Eddie Van Halen had. And this is the first time we're mentioning his name on our show, and it's the first time since his passing. And I thought we just need to give a few accolades out there,
Oh, absolutely.
What he did influenced so much.
I give two Van Halen stories, and I never saw Van Halen live. That's one of the bands I wish I would have gotten to see live. But two Van Halen stories. One, this would have been for me 8th grade. I'm almost positive this was 8th grade. And where I went to school, we had junior high. So 7th, 8th, and 9th grade, that was junior high.
Everybody's picturing Steve in junior high right now.
I looked exactly the same. Had the beard and everything. I just was shorter.
Right. With the propeller and everything.
Yeah, right. And we had dances in the gym. And I remember this one time, there was a DJ and he's playing records and stuff. And he had an air guitar contest. And he played Van Halen's Jump. And I distinctly remember a couple guys I knew, and actually there was this girl who got up and she was kind of doing the David Lee Roth thing, and I just the guys doing the air guitar, and I'm going, I think they might have been like 9th graders, and I'm going, oh dude, that's so cool, air guitar, and And then I remember, and I think it was, I want to say it was 1984, that album tour. I'm not positive. I remember some of the tour shirts my friends had gone, and the concert shirt on the back, it said, Van Halen, Tour of the World. And it didn't say World Tour, it said Tour of the World. And I never forgot that. I was like, wow, that's like even more impressive.
Wow. Well, it's just amazing how one person's influence, and I know there's controversy. Every band has controversy, and we're going to get into some of that tonight, most likely, with the subject we're going to be talking about. But I think it's just amazing that you and I have interviewed secular artists, we've interviewed Christian artists, and what guitarist hasn't said, at least in one way, shape, or form, that 1978 Eddie Van Halen's Eruption, that was it. That's if they came on the scene, if they came on the scene post 78, right? So if they started their career in the 80s at any point, absolutely, absolutely. And you watch you watch the documentaries, and Mike, I don't know about you, I'm just a junkie for those behind the scenes documentaries. I love them. I eat them up. Whether it was back in the day on VH1 or now it's Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever, and I love watching those. The Sunset Strip days. Hair metal. That. But everybody talked about Eddie. Yeah, well, the Eruption just set the tone for guitar playing, and look, here we are, almost 6 years away from being 50 years old, and we're still talking. We're still talking about it. We're talking about it right now. It's over 40 years old, and we're talking about what he did. So. Just wanted to put that out there, folks, to say that we appreciate the influence that he had on music in general, because all the music we enjoy, Eddie Van Halen was behind it somehow, in some way. Having said that, we do have a special guest on our show today, and I'm excited about it. He's with us, and he's going to join us in a second. But before he comes on, I want to give the floor, as you know, ladies and gentlemen, to Mr. Segway.
The thing is, Wildman, you set me up that way every time, and I appreciate it. In fact, I'm thinking about getting a cape. I don't know, like a cowl, like a superhero thing, Mr. Segway. Actually becoming a character. I'm leaning that direction. But I hadn't mentioned this to you. I probably should have before we got on the show tonight. But this may be the last time you see me with the beard.
With the what?
With the beard. Because here's the deal. I'm wanting to shave my beard. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I'm going to need to probably get some hair implants, but I'm looking to grow the rock locks back out.
Oh, here we go.
And I'm going to have to borrow. Well, listen. I'm going to borrow my wife's hairspray.
Aquanet.
We did back in the day, borrow your girlfriend's hairspray. Might even have to borrow some of my wife's makeup because, man, I'm feeling the need to glam it up. I'm feeling the need to glam it up for the show. Wow.
Yes, and the reason Steve said all that, folks, is because with us is Metal Mike, who is actually the host of the 80's Glam Metal Cast. Mike, how are you doing? And welcome to the program, sir.
So great to be here, guys. Awesome. Can't wait to talk about the 80s.
Of course. It was the greatest era of all time, right?
Yes. And you know what I thought about the other day was I think while we were living in it, you're just kind of living out your life. You don't really think much of it. You're just having a good time. And I want to say in the 90s, I think people kind of made us think that it really wasn't a great era. When we got into the grunge, I think there was a lot of shame cast on the 80s and the hair metal scene and all that. But I think now it's really regained a lot of popularity and steam. And it's just nice when you see some of these younger kids who probably weren't even alive in the 80s, they hold it in such a high regard. We can say we lived in a very, very cool time period, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's interesting you mentioned that, because so many of these bands, it's really been interesting. I think I found it interesting, and I think Wildman has too, and I'm sure you as well, that a lot of these bands are still releasing albums, putting out new material. And obviously the year 2020 was rough in terms of live shows and touring and so forth. But these folks are still going on the road. They're still making videos. And what is so neat for so many of them, they're keeping their classic sound, yet they're doing some new stuff. There's some fresh stuff in there, but they're absolutely taking advantage of modern production. So the sound is better than ever. I'm going, oh my goodness. Some of these albums, I'm like, guys, if you'd have this album in 1985 or 1988, you would have gone through the stratosphere. So yeah, it was a great era. And there's a lot of these bands are still doing great stuff.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the only problem in the era that we're in now is it's kind of a disposable era with streaming. So, for instance, when you bought an album, you would listen to it over and over again. When you would hear things on the radio, see it on video, that repetition really got ingrained into your brain. And the problem with streaming is a lot of times, even if it's Rat or somebody that puts out a new song, people are going to listen to it once. If it doesn't register, they're going to move on to the next thing. And I think that's the problem with music in general. But yeah, you're right. There's a lot of great stuff, and people have to give it a chance, and they have to give it multiple listens.
Well, there's a question I'd like to actually just throw out to all of us here. Although I think, Mike, you probably already kind of tipped your hand as to how you would answer it. But, in terms of listening to individual songs versus whole albums, I am very much, and again, a product of my youth, I'm a whole album guy. So when I get a new album, I listen to the whole thing, first to last song, multiple times. I won't listen to any other album until I've listened to that new album multiple times. It's really gotten ingrained in me. And I wouldn't even think about skipping a song until I've really got that album solid, kind of just in me. Has that changed for you guys? And I'll throw that to both of you guys. Do you tend to still listen to whole albums that way, even though it's maybe in a digital format? Or do you find yourself a little more cafeteria selection? I'm going to listen to this song, listen to that song.
I'll jump in if it's okay. Basically, yeah, I mean, I'm with you. I think an album made a statement, back in the day, and you wanted to hear the whole statement being made. But I got to admit, man, I like Spotify, and I have a playlist that has probably over 700 songs, and I like to put that baby on shuffle and just jam out. So, so I see both sides of it.
Yeah, I would say both sides as well. And I think it's interesting that we are in an era, like if you go back to albums or even listening to the radio, and if you listen to the top radio station or whatever, you would have to suffer through songs you didn't care for to get to the ones you liked, right? So now with Spotify, playlists, Apple Music, whatever, you can create your own station with all the hit songs that you appreciate and like, so you never have to suffer through anything you don't like, which says a lot for how we've become so individual in our culture right now, and those things going forward. But I'm curious, Mike, when we talk about the 80s music specifically, what was it about the 80s music for you? And of course, we're talking about the metal, and your show is about glam metal. That's what we're talking about. What was it about that music that just sucked you in?
That's a good question. And a lot of it, I had to go back to when I was, just a kid. I got into this kind of music probably about 10, 11 years old, very early. So I think MTV played a big role in it. I also had some older cousins that would, give me some of their old albums that they were tired of. But a lot of it, honestly, I think it has to do with characters. I figured, maybe a year prior to me getting into heavy metal, I was playing with G.I. Joe guys and He-Man and Thundercats, right? And when you kind of And when you discover music and you discover metal, it's like these guys are characters, man. You look at Kiss. I mean, come on, this is characters, to the max.
Right.
And even Motley Crue, Blackie Lawless, Dee Snider. So I think as a young kid who's coming off all these, fantasy characters with toys, these guys were like lifelike toys, you know what I mean? And then the music, the music obviously registers to your ears. It sounds good. You're heading into your teens. It's the angry and the rebellious time. So it was just a perfect storm, I think, for me.
Sure. Yeah. I think also, that, I've heard you mentioned earlier, Mike, about how going into the 90s with the grunge, people look back and they make fun of the 80s. And there's people today,
sure.
If people like, my kids would look at a Stryper, Motley Crue or whatever, and how they were dressing in the 80s, they were pushing the envelope quite a bit there, Poison as well. The thick makeup, not just a touch of it. It was really getting strong. But one of my biggest beefs as a musician myself is I hate the fact that in many cases overshadows the incredible talent that these bands had. Has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's, a lot of people have problems with the term hair metal because they think it's synonymous with no talent, image over talent. But, I think those who are musicians or who know music and you listen, I mean, these guys are awesome. And maybe some of them weren't incredible when they came out, but they evolved. Motley Crue and Poison are great examples of that. You listen to their first album, it's very raw, it's very simplistic, which is great. But if you follow their trajectory of albums, I mean, they got better. They got more depth in some of their lyrics and things like that. So I feel like a lot of these bands, some came right out of the gate and were incredible, obviously, but then others I think evolved. So, I mean, I think there's just great lyrics, great melodies, great musicianship in there, and you can't just base it on the image.
No, but I'm going to say two things about the image. One, and for this, I'm going to go all the way back to 1968. Okay, 1968, and the musical Hair, which has come up before.
I wasn't born.
Okay.
Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, okay. Well, I realize you're a youngin'. I get it. In fact, you recall, Wildman, when we had Les Carlson from Bloodgood. He was in a touring company of Hair, played the lead character, Claude Hooper Bukowski. But there's a song in the musical Hair, and I love the line where this individual is singing. He says, "I would just like to say that it is my opinion that longer hair and other flamboyant affectations of appearance are nothing more than the male's emergence into the glorious plumage that is the birthright of his sex." Now, stop and think about it. In the natural world, right, the animal world, it's the male of the species that is the more flamboyant. From birds to, think lions and tigers, oh my. Right, it's the male is really the more flamboyant, and so there was a certain aspect to this where it's an interesting psychology, but it's like guys being ultra guys by actually taking on some of the stuff that society had actually taken on as female, with the makeup and the hair, right, and so really it was this explosion of kind of this male persona. Which I definitely dug. I'm like, dude, I love it. And again, it goes along with the music. But then the other piece of it is, can we just acknowledge for a moment that this was fun music?
Yeah.
And the stage shows were fun, and the videos were fun. And I realize, and I get the people that make music about somber topics. I get that. There's a place for that. But at the same time, I can look out my door and see, I don't know, depressing stuff. Right? I can go out my door and see serious issues and so forth. And sometimes I just want to have fun. I just want to escape and, rock and roll all night and party every day. And so this kind of goes with that. And we need that too, I think, in our entertainment. So I love the look along with the music.
Sure.
Yeah, you nailed it. It was, the look was fun, the sound was fun, and I think as the decade went on, it was just too much of the same. That's what brought the end of it. And unfortunately, all these characters that they push are kind of polarizing or one dimensional. You know what I mean? Somebody like Vince Neil, Nikki Sixx. It was this image of just party, fun, and then you had the opposite of that with Kurt Cobain, and now it's just depression, and So and once again, there was no fun anymore. It was just everyone had to be serious 24/7. And I'm sure Kurt Cobain had multiple dimensions, and we know that the 80s hair metal guys had multiple dimensions, and we didn't get to see that. So, I guess it's like with anything. I look at it was weird. I kind of think of it like the superhero genre. You know what I mean? It's fun, but it's kind of like we're in overload lately. We've had so many of these movies. Would this ever tank? You know what I mean? You can only go to the well so many times.
Yeah.
Well, and that's true. And let's face it. Once Quiet Riot hit the pop scene, right, with Metal Health, and that broke this kind of metal into the mainstream. And then companies are like, hey, kids are willing to pay money for this stuff, right? So let's clone all these bands. Let's clone the sound and the look. And so again, that's when you sort of get that commercialization, and you're right, it becomes overkill. So tell us, Mike, let's talk here. Who was the first 80s, let's stay with that, with the 80s glam here, that you saw live in concert?
All right, here we go. I was 11 years old. My dad took me to my first concert, and this was my very first concert. It wasn't just my first hair metal concert, but it was Motley Crue and Whitesnake, the Girls tour. So how do you, where do you go from there? You start with, that's crazy. So that was my first concert.
Okay. All right. At this point, Wildman is going to go to the kitchen. He's going to get a snack, and he's going to come back an hour later, okay? Because I am a huge Whitesnake fan.
Yeah. The snake.
Oh, man. Do you remember what tour that was?
Yeah, that was when they got big with the self-titled. Yeah,
87 album. Okay,
yeah. And they were the opener. And honestly, musically, they were better than Motley Crue. Definitely.
Wow.
They blew Motley Crue away. Motley Crue, and here it is. I'm only 11 years old, and I remember thinking, hearing Vince Neil's voice. I just remember it being very high pitched, and it just sounded weird to me. You know what I mean? It didn't sound that great, but the show was crazy. I mean, you had the spinning drum set and the fire. Yeah. So, I mean, it was like sensory overload. I mean, I do remember so much of it. And obviously a lot of it's documented in the Wild Side video. That was, that was the stage show. But man, that was just an awesome way to start off going to concerts.
Oh my goodness.
I had the opportunity to get backstage.
What's that?
Did you have the opportunity to get backstage?
No, I was way up in the nosebleeds. I remember my mom saying, she was freaking out. She thought I was going to get hit in the head with a beer bottle or something. She had this warped vision of what goes on at a rock concert. That stuff does happen, but I survived. I didn't get hit in the head with anything. So
yeah.
Well, so my wife did. My wife did get hit in the head at a Whitesnake concert.
No kidding.
Wildman knows this story. So I got to see, but this back in the 80s, I saw Whitesnake twice. Once the Sleaze, they were the main headliner. Sleazebees opened for him one time, and Great White opened for him the other time. And Great White and Whitesnake, oh my gosh, talk about a killer combo. But the time I saw them with the woman who would become my wife, she was still my girlfriend. We were in college at the time. And this would have been the Slip of the Tongue album, which came out about 89, I believe.
Great album.
Saw them in Indianapolis, and we were on the side of the arena. All right, so you can picture oval-shaped arena. We're on the side, and the stage is at one end. So when the band comes out, we were on the side. We turn to look at the stage. Well, here's my girlfriend who was sitting beside me. Well, now as we turn, she's in front of me. Okay. Well, I'm banging my head, and I got my long hair, and my chin slams into the back of her head and gave her a powerful headache. And so now when we play Two Truths and a Lie, at places, one of her things will be like, I got my head banged at a heavy metal concert. And people will always assume that's the lie because my wife is a sweet, demure woman. She likes country music. She's not at all a headbanger, and they always assume that's the lie, when in fact that's the truth.
Oh, that's awesome, man.
So, when we talk during that era, when you were going to concerts, Mike, I mentioned about the backstage. Did you ever have the opportunity to meet an artist during that time?
I'm trying to think. I don't remember, meeting very many artists back then. The only person I think I did meet was I don't know if you ever heard of the band Little Caesar. I do remember going onto the bus and meeting the band Little Caesar. And this was the Kiss tour, Hot in the Shade, 1990. So I don't know how we pulled that. I mean, you guys probably went through this kind of stuff. We're always young kids. We're trying to linger around, trying to meet the band and stuff like that. So that's the only time I really remember, to be honest, meeting anybody back in the day.
Okay. So, talk to us about the podcast, the Metal Cast that you have. First of all, how long have you been doing this show?
It's been a little over a year now. Yep.
Okay. And you've kind of already alluded to it, but, our fans and your fans, everybody would like to hear you probably share what was it that motivated you to do so?
Anybody who follows me on Twitter or has kind of followed what I do, I'm a very creative person, or I like to be creative, and I like to have, different outlets. And it just kind of happened by chance. I saw that the Twitter account was kind of, picking up some steam. A lot of these 80s guys followed me and I interacted with them. And I just, a lot of people do podcasts, and I thought to myself, hey, maybe I could do something like this. And, I've taken it in a lot of different directions. I obviously have interviewed a lot of my heroes, which has been incredible. So if it ended tomorrow, I could at least say, hey, man, I talked to Bruce Kulick from Kiss. I talked to this guy, I talked to that guy. So, but then I found that I like to do different things where my kids and I, we put together these wrestling matches where we just did a recent one where we put Vinnie Vincent versus Ace Frehley. It's done with like computer animation, and there's a lot of comedy writing on it. And once again, I didn't even know I could do something like that. So I just look at myself like I'm on this journey. Is it my dream to be like the next Eddie Trunk? No, you know what I mean. I don't dream about like being an interviewer. I just dream about somebody who is just likes to entertain people and be creative and have fun with this genre. So tomorrow it could evolve into something else. I'm not dead set on interviewing rockers from the 80s, although I have done that and it's done well. But I just kind of want to see where it goes.
Yeah, sure.
All right, I will go.
I know I've watched you get a strong following very quickly over the year and a half that you've been going, and I see you're getting a lot of support. And I also see, not everybody realizes this, but what you're doing takes a lot of work. And we know how much work it takes to do a podcast, number one. Yeah. But also seeing you just consistently stay on Twitter and send out videos, everything to followers, that takes a lot. And I know you're doing this on the side the same way that we are with full-time jobs. So how's time management?
Yeah, it's like sometimes I get in trouble because I'm slacking on my home duties. I get in trouble by my wife. No, but it is. And here's the thing that you guys probably run into this too. You start to question, especially with the tweeting and sending out these videos. You start to wonder, am I doing it for myself or am I doing it for the 14,000 followers? So I get it. It's like it's a work in progress. You constantly have to put yourself out there. And same thing with the interviews. You got to keep putting out interviews. You've got to send it to different websites. You've got to coordinate with this one, that one. So, it just, you just have to keep at it. So yeah, it's been interesting.
Sure. Yeah, I am going to come back. I want to go around the room with a question, but I want to stay kind of on this for a moment. Do you find that what you do, both through the Twitter and then the Metal Cast on YouTube, do you see yourself in any way as someone who's really helping to support and promote these bands? Obviously, they especially the established artists, they've got their agents behind them, they got their label behind them, they've got all that kind of stuff. But do you see that as one of the things that you are helping to do for them, or is that not necessarily a piece of what you really do?
No, I definitely think it is. I mean, that was the whole point in, creating the Twitter. I don't even know when I started on Twitter, maybe in 2016, was just to, promote this kind of music, connect with other people who enjoy it. And I think if these guys, if one of them gets an interview that gets viewed, 500 times, 1,000 times, that's good for them. So.
Yeah.
And you guys know, I don't know if you know how the monetization works on YouTube. I mean, it really comes out to pennies. It's not like, you can't make a living, not at this point, not until you get a really large, YouTube following. So no, I do it for the love of music. I do it as a creative outlet. And like I said, if it helps people promote their new music or their old music or whatever they've got going on, I mean, it's a win-win for everybody.
Well, and I don't think that, let's face it, 1985 is likely never to come back.
That's right.
Bite your tongue.
If wishing made it so. But, the arenas, that level of popularity, that level of right. Music play, sales of records and so forth, it's just not going to happen. I wouldn't predict that it would for this kind of music. But you think about how a lot of this got started, and we've talked about this. In fact, I just was re-listening to one of our episodes, Wildman. We were talking about this. A lot of this came out of, really the hard rock and early heavy metal from the very late 60s and 70s. Well, that stuff was very underground before it became anything like mainstream. Even Zeppelin was underground initially. And so that's, you had this loyal fan base. Then it starts to get some attention, gets slammed by the popular press, and then finally it explodes all over the place. But now we've kind of contracted back again, and so it's back to that sort of niche audience, right? And so you're going to have the groups on Facebook, the groups on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, whatnot. And so, no, they may not be selling, quintuple platinum albums anymore. But I do think shows like yours and ours and others help those fans and those artists continue to interact in maybe a little bit more of an underground way, but I think it's still an important way.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the funny thing is, and I thought about this myself, you nailed it. It's almost like the planets aligned back in the mid to late 80s. You're right. This genre was kind of, in the shadows for the most part. And then it just became this, it became pop culture, became pop music. And I don't think you're ever going to see that again. Not with the artists that we know of, as of right now. I think someday it'll take a younger artist to maybe take this kind of a spirit of music and take it to a high level again. But I don't think Motley Crue is going to have a number one hit ever again. That's just my opinion. Right. And I'm sure most people agree with me. So we saw history. We saw something that was just unheard of, and you're right. Now today it's kind of back down. I mean, touring wise, it's huge. Bands like Metallica and Motley Crue could put on a huge concert. But like I said, it's not a pop music force right now. And it probably won't be again, maybe ever. But it's interesting to look at it that way, because you're right. I mean, it was just kind of like that moment in time that we may never see again. But hey, man, I was glad that we were there to experience it for sure. Yeah. Definitely.
All right. So here's my around the room question that I was going to ask before. First album that you bought, and what was the format? Was it vinyl? Was it cassette? Was it 8-track? Was it CD? So what was your first album you recall? And what was the format of it?
It's the memories are kind of sketchy, but I think it's Michael Jackson Thriller on LP. I think that's my first one. I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
Wow. First one that I bought. Now that's kind of shaky because and I'm going to admit this, that the first one that I actually had that I listened to was one that my brother bought, and he copied it for me on the dual cassette.
Yo, I remember those.
Yes. At the time. So yes, it was a cassette, and it was Captured in Time and Space by Petra, 85. Yep. First.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Steve?
First 45 was Kenny Rogers, The Gambler. First cassette tape was Ronnie Millsap, Stranger in My House.
Oh.
So very country. First album would have been the Oak Ridge Boys, Fancy Free, which was the album that had Elvira on it. And my first CD was that 1987 Whitesnake.
Yeah.
Right. Now let me do a round the room thing. This is going to be a new segment for our show now.
Yeah, we should.
But no. Okay, here's one. Is the first rock song you heard in your entire life? The first one that you can remember.
I'm going to go way back, and I don't know how I remember this, but I'm pretty sure I had a 45 of Another One Bites the Dust about when I was like, I want to say 4 years old. I remember having a little record player. I had Another One Bites the Dust, and I had Woman by John Lennon. So these were 45s from 1980. So I don't know how I remember that, but those are my first, singles or first time of being cognizant of what rock music was. So yeah,
sure, yeah.
Golly, it probably had to be Beth by Kiss.
Okay, nice.
I was in elementary school, and one of my buddies, this has been around fifth grade, and he and his brothers had a band, and they got to play at our school. And here's my buddy who's my age, and he was on drums. And I remember them doing Beth, and I don't know if that's the reason that I got Kiss Alive 2, the double gatefold album, or it was just because I'd seen Kiss and Meets the Phantom of the Park, and I was intrigued by the makeup. But I remember that album and Beth. Yeah,
I remember. This is hard for me. I know I threw the question out, which is interesting. But it was a 45. We had one of those floor model stereos in our house, and I was very little. I mean, I'm talking probably third grade, third grade, and my parents, all they had was gospel. That's all they had. That's what we grew up on as a church. But they had this 45 of Freedom was on one side, and the song If was on the other.
By Bread?
Right. So Freedom had that rock edge sound to it with the drums. And I remember that age, I was thinking, I love this. This is incredible. And around that same time, I after I got off the school bus one day, went down the street to one of my friend's house, and he had Kiss LPs all over the place. And I didn't even know what those things were yet, but he played Love Gun. I remember that. And I loved the sound. I loved the sound of the guitar. I loved the sound, the whole rock sound. And this is what I love. So I came home, told my older brother that, hey, Robbie has Kiss. I heard it. I love it. First thing he does, he tells my mom,
no.
Hey, Mom, he says he likes Kiss. My mom, no, he doesn't. And then I knew something was up. Something was up with this. It wasn't just music, but that was my first introduction to it. And the reason why I was asking that was because there's a part of me that thinks that a lot of this has a natural connection to it. That we just talked about at a very young age how we heard it and we just were sucked in. It's not like we tried to do it. Now, in some cases, I know some people did because they wanted to rebel and they wanted to show people, hey, look at what we can do. But there's a natural element, I think, to what we gravitate to music-wise that we can't deny.
Well, how many artists have said that we've interviewed?
Right.
Who heard that one lick on the guitar, who saw that lead singer in the band at an early age and said, I knew that I had to do that for the rest of my life. Right. And so you're right. I think you're absolutely right about that.
Yeah. So, Mike, a couple questions for you. We're going to throw a lot more at you. So just get comfortable. We alluded earlier, I think all three of us did, about that era and us looking back on it because we grew up in it. And I know that there would probably be others who would say the same thing about the 70s or the same thing about the 60s. However, now, we're all biased because of what we came out of, but I don't really hear anybody talking about any of those eras in the same way that people like you and I and Steve are talking about the 80s. So trying to be objective is difficult, but is there really a pinnacle, like as you mentioned, the planets being aligned? Is this something that is really good and solid, and it's not just old people looking back on saying, yeah, well, back in my day there was much better than what the kids are doing nowadays, and all that type of thing. Are we really talking about something that was superior?
That's an excellent question, and I think you've got to start with it could be generational, because you figure, let's just say we're in all, I assume we're all in our 40s, right? And we're all,
I am. I still am. I just want to put that out there.
Okay. Well, whatever. We're all, between 40 and 50. That's where we are. And I think that we've really clung to the technology or learned the technology. So we're in there. You know what I mean? We're putting this stuff out there and we're absorbing it. Now, let's just say somebody who's 70 or 75 years old who was maybe really enjoying the Beatles and all that kind of stuff in the 60s, are they as in tune with this stuff online with Twitter and all these groups? So that it could be generational. That's just part of it. So maybe that's why you don't see a ton of groups and pages about the 60s and the 70s as much as you see as the 80s. But I think, at the end of the day, what it is that we like, in my opinion, is good. If it wasn't good, young people wouldn't gravitate to it. It wouldn't still sound good to your ears, because we've all went back and heard something that was crappy that we used to like, right? And we don't listen to it anymore. You know what I mean? Right. So I think there's something good there. Also, I think there's something timeless there, because why is it like songs like Kickstart My Heart and Round, they're in, Planters peanut commercials and Geico commercials. This stuff can't be crap. I'm sorry. I mean, it has some kind of appeal, maybe not to everybody, because back to what you guys were saying with the connection. I mean, music's like food, right? You know what I mean? Like there's certain kind of food I hate and there's certain kind of foods that I love. They're not the same kind of foods that you like and you love. So everybody's got different, perceptions of music. Some people hear that heavy guitar and they're like, no, that's not for me. I want to listen to classical music or soothing music. You know what I mean? Everybody's different. So for us that we're talking here, we like, hard rock, heavy metal music. So, we get it. But yeah, I mean, I really back to the original point here is that I really think that it is good. What we like is good. If it wasn't, people wouldn't be talking about it today, and it wouldn't be being used in commercials and all that kind of stuff. If it was garbage, it would be in the trash where it belongs. That's my opinion.
I would agree. And I think there's a certain, and there always is this, a certain snobbery. Different folks and with different things. Oh, I don't watch movies. I only read books. Oh, come on. You don't watch some fabulous films. All right, there's some fabulous.
Where did Python accent come from there?
I really don't know. It's like, come on, recognize it. And I think you're exactly right, Mike. I think there's some excellent. Is some of it juvenile? Yes. Some of the lyrics, especially.
Yes.
Yes. They are. But again, at the end of the day, fun is a part of life also. Mm-hmm. And you need that. But I'm going to ask this, and I don't know, Wildman, if you and I have ever talked about it, I'm certainly curious to hear about this from Mike. One of the things that this kind of music did do for me, though, was it opened me up to other styles and genres of music that I'd never even heard of before, specifically the blues.
Yeah.
Once I got into the 80s, then I was getting really into the hard rock. And then when I started studying those guys and looking at those guys, every one of them, even all the British guys, pointed back to American blues. And so I'm like, oh, hey, what is this? And so then I started looking at the blues guys, and then I just fell in love from the really raw acoustic Delta blues, the electrified Chicago blues, and all that kind of stuff. So I'm curious, did the 80s take you anywhere else in your own musical journey and appreciation?
Oh, yeah, definitely. And that's one thing I'd like to make clear, which I'm sure people understand about me, is I don't just listen to 80s hair metal. I've definitely journeyed in other genres of music and different paths. The next path for me after the hair metal thing was kind of going away. And that's why a lot of times it's funny. People will say to me, oh, how about this hair metal album that came out in 91 and 92? I'll be honest. I kind of checked out at that point. I started gravitating toward thrash metal. I thought the stuff like Anthrax and Overkill and all those bands were really cool. And then from there, that's when 9 Inch Nails and Ministry, I thought that was great. I went to the first Lollapalooza. I mean, that was amazing. Jane's Addiction, Living Colour, 9 Inch Nails, Ice-T. So I'm somebody that can appreciate all different kinds of things with music. So did the hair metal thing kind of lead up to all those other things? Of course. I'll be honest, yes. Lately, as I've gotten older, I do gravitate more to the hair metal sound. It just sounds great to me. I love everything that goes along with it. But yeah, man, I agree. I definitely dipped into other genres. And you go backwards too. Like you said, you go back to the 70s, Led Zeppelin. I love the Beatles. I love the Doors. I love Jimi Hendrix. So I've been all over the place. Even if that's where I started with rock is in the hair metal scene. But same thing. I went all over the place and got into all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, so Mike, were you pointing to me, Steve?
I've got a follow-up question there, but I can hang on to it.
No, the floor is yours, sir.
Well, simply because you mentioned the Doors, and as a Stryper fan, first off, as a music fan, I love singing along with my favorite records back in the day, still do today. But Michael Sweet was rather hard to sing along with. Okay?
Yes.
I'm a natural baritone bass, and that guy had a range that was, through the rafters. And there are even times sometimes with, David Coverdale, and Still of the Night, it was really hot. But then I'm like, oh my goodness, Jim Morrison had that wonderfully rich baritone. And I could sing along with Jim Morrison very, very easily. Dun, 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 dun. Well, the day destroys the night. I'm going, yeah, I can sing that, right? So I'm just curious, and this is for both you guys. Who did you enjoy singing along with? Whether it was in the shower, going to school with your Walkman on your ears, whatever it was, who did you really enjoy singing along with?
Go ahead, Wildman.
Oh man, it was for me. Going from the Christian era, and that's something else that tells you about how influential the hard rock and metal was at the time. That it branched into a whole genre of the Christian aspect. Which looking back on it, I wonder if it had to do that because Christians can make good music even if they don't advertise it that way. But for me, it was definitely John Schlitt, Greg X. Volz, Michael Sweet. I have a pretty decent high range, but man, they would always get to that second chorus where I'd have to bow down, and just cut out. But that was some of my, I would call it my vocal training, was trying to stay with them and trying to stay with their range. But that's who it was for me.
I used to, I sang in bands and I played in bands as a younger man. And, but, of course, love to sing in the car, always have. And probably the person's voice that I can emulate almost perfectly, which is not saying much, is Alice Cooper. I love singing Alice Cooper. I mean, and is almost the same as Jim Morrison. He's a crooner. He's not that hard to replicate. So probably Alice Cooper is one of my favorite people to sing to. But, I got to just say something about Jim Morrison because I was thinking about this today. And it's funny that he even came up. I didn't even expect this. But how we were talking earlier how like Vince Neil was on one side of the spectrum and Kurt Cobain on the other. I think Jim Morrison hits dead center with that kind of stuff because he was like the cool, sleazy rocker guy, but he was also like this poet, deep guy. Like he was just way ahead of his time, man. He's just so amazing. And let's not discredit the other members of the Doors. I mean, everybody in that band is just a wizard on their instrument, whether it be Ray Manzarek or Robbie Krieger, John Densmore. I mean, that's a super band, man. Super.
Yeah.
So, all right. So here's the thing. So I mentioned earlier that I'm a high school teacher. I teach high school Latin at a very, very large public high school in Indianapolis. And at one point in one of our third year Latin class, we study some medieval Latin and we get into some music. And there's a piece called the Carmen of Burana, which has been done by different composers. And I'll play that and look at the lyrics in Latin, so forth, kind of cool. And then I pull out this synthesizer laden version that was done by Mr. Ray Manzarek. And I think about 1980. And I think if you look on YouTube, you can find it. Ray Manzarek's Carmen of Burana. And it's got all this funky keyboard stuff. It is synthesizer stuff, and it's really, really, really cool.
Oh my God. Thanks for letting me know. I got to check that out. Cause I mean, I had a cousin that was really big in the Doors, and I think that kind of helped me get into them. But man, I got a lot of love for the Doors for sure.
So, Mike, one of the things that we've noticed on our show And you alluded to this earlier, that, and this is the reason Steve and I do this show pretty much. We just love interviewing artists that we grew up watching and loving. This is, we've joked before saying we use the podcast as an excuse to be able to talk to them. But one of the things that we've learned in talking to the artists, especially the ones who are still out there doing this. I mean, we've talked to some who are pretty much done and they're doing something else and just talking about their history. But the ones who are still out there putting out the albums, or they've had a reunion and they've come back and they're doing it now again. We're hearing a lot that this style of music is huge outside of the U.S., in Brazil, in Europe. Just got a message last week. One band that we interviewed, they were getting very high ratings out of Greece, and they were telling me about that. So has that been your experience as well?
Yeah, I mean, let's face it. I think that's been like that for a very long time. That it's still big outside of the U.S. A lot of people would always tour Japan. That it might have been over here in the States, but they'd play in Japan. And the biggest example of this, they're not a hair metal band, but they're a metal band, is the band Manowar. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Manowar. Mm-hmm. So Manowar, I live in upstate New York. Manowar is from Auburn, New York. They're probably about an hour and a half from where I am. And these guys would probably be lucky to fill a club in upstate New York. But when they play overseas, I mean, we're talking jam-packed sellout stadiums in Germany, in Russia. You know what I mean? And it just shows you, so right, metal is huge in these other countries, and so is hard rock and glam metal and all that stuff. Crazy thing is like, I don't know if you guys, if you're on like Chartable, if you ever check out like what your ratings are.
Right.
Yes.
So obviously, yeah. I mean, mine pretty much tanks in the United States, but I've been number 1, top 10 in like Singapore, Finland, Netherlands. You know what I mean? And you know what? And I'm not saying that to like, I'm saying like those people are awesome, man. I wish the United States was like that. And it blows your mind. Once again, there's no money in this podcasting stuff. You know what I mean? It's not, we're not in it for the money. We do it because, like I said, it's fun and we want to talk to these artists, but it's pretty damn cool to think that like somebody in Singapore is listening to the stuff that I do at my house. I mean, you're connecting with people all over the world. Just think about right now. We're all, you guys are living, you said Indianapolis, we're in different parts of the world. And here we are, we're talking. I mean, the internet and everything that's going on today, it's amazing how people can connect. It's mind blowing.
Do you have any thoughts, Mike, on because this is something that's puzzling myself, and Steve and I have talked about it multiple times. Any specific thoughts on why it might be big in the other countries? What is the cause for that?
That's what I have no idea. I don't know why. We're getting
ready to move, just so you know.
Yeah, I don't know. You know what I mean? I don't know what it is. I mean, are they just into this piece of our culture, and if they are, what, isn't it sad that like our own country can't really grasp it anymore? You know what I mean? Like we don't care. I mean, look at the artists that are big today. I mean, I don't even know if I could tell you who is. You know what I mean? But to think that they're so into this, I don't know what it is. That's a great question. I wish I knew the answer. Yeah, but, they definitely enjoy it for sure.
Yeah, we'll keep trying to figure it out, because that's a nut I'd like to crack open someday.
Boy, you know what, though? I'm sure. I bet you anything that somebody in some musicology department, maybe at some university, has done some kind of study on that. I'd have to imagine that they have, because you think about where hard rock began in some of those working class towns in England.
Yep.
Again, I'm just thinking about Sabbath in particular, from Birmingham and some of the Robert Plant and John Paul Jones were both working class backgrounds and that kind of stuff. And so and in some of these other places you mentioned, not all of them, but some of them, I think, where in maybe some ways life maybe is a little bit more difficult, and some of this raw, hard music seems to kind of fit with some of that life. But then again, you got Japan. All right. So, Deep Purple's Made in Japan album, which was, let's see what, that was 72, because that was right before Ian Gillan left and Roger Glover left. And their Made in Japan album was just one of the blockbuster all-time live albums. It's like up there with Frampton Comes Alive in terms of live albums. And so there was this huge audience in Japan then that persisted solid through the 80s with the hair metal bands. They loved them in Japan, and they still do today. So I'm not sure what's going on with Japan. So there's somebody's got to have done some kind of study on this.
Well, think about Kiss. I mean, Kiss was huge in Japan, and it makes sense. I mean, the kabuki makeup, the characters. Yes. I mean, Japan was obsessed with characters. You know, Godzilla, and I mean, you look at Power Rangers and all these different characters. Kamen Rider, all this stuff that's huge in Japan. I mean, some of these rock metal characters are just fit right in. Kind of what we were talking about earlier. How I said, you evolve from your toys to your, to your metal boys or whatever. So, maybe that's part of it. They like these characters,
That's a good one. Hey, speaking of that, did you ever, or did either of you guys ever listen to Loudness?
Oh, yeah, I love Loudness.
I remember when they were on tour. I remember, 89 maybe? So Mike, the one question that I'm sure everybody would like to know, you've been doing this for about a year and a half, and everything's kind of evolved for you. What are the plans? Anything that you can tell us about what this looks like in 2021, the 80s Glam Metal Cast?
Yeah, I'm thinking, obviously a little bit of more of the same. I've definitely got some interviews kind of in the can already and some more planned. So, just keep talking to some of these heroes of the past and try to get some of the stories that, questions answered that we all want to, hear. But I'm looking to take it in some different directions. I want to do some different things. Like I said, I want to do more, storytelling, whether it be in these wrestling matches that we do, or I've actually just put together a script idea for Kiss, the Elder, and I'm going to read that on one of the podcasts. So I want to go kind of in some weird directions, just try some different things. It might not work, but you know what? As you know, with podcasting, there's always another week. so it's not like, you always think of a feature film. If you do a film and it bombs, I mean, you've just spent years putting it all together, and it would take you years to do another one. With podcasting, you can have a bomb podcast, and you got to do another one next week. So it's almost the way pro wrestling is. You could kind of, react to things as they happen. So yeah, so definitely more of the same, but we'll intermix some more crazy stuff in. So
good. So where's the best place for those who are listening right now who haven't heard of you before? Where's the best place they can find you?
The best place is to go on to YouTube, 80s Glam Metal Cast channel. You could also go to Twitter. There's a lot of links to everything from there. That's at 80s Glam Metal 1. And it's also on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. So if you just search 80s Glam Metal Cast, it'll pop right up.
Well, great. Well, we want to thank you for taking the time to be on our show. It's always great to interview somebody who does what we do. That's, because we speak a language that the commoners just don't know, right?
Exactly.
I want to throw a final question to you, okay?
Sure.
Metal Mike is on a deserted island, has no idea how long he's going to be there. He can only listen to one album. What does Metal Mike choose?
Well, anybody who knows me knows Kiss is my favorite band. Right now I'm going to say Kiss Dynasty. I just love that album. I'd bring that with me. Yeah,
I understand they're doing a big deal tomorrow, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because I looked at the air times, and I think they're doing it in the time zone that they're in India. So I think it first airs like 12 noon in my time zone. So I'm like, I'm going to be still at work, so I don't know if I'm going to catch that showing. So hopefully I'll be able to check it out later at night. So.
Well, Steve will be able to tell you all about it because he's not doing anything this week. So. Well, hey, thanks again for coming on, sir. And folks, continue to follow 80s Glam Metal Cast. More big stuff coming around. And what I love about it, and I'm sure Steve as well, I love about hearing you is that you're not just stuck on one thing. That this is what we do. You're like you have. Creativity is just like in your bones. We can tell just listening to you. It's not, you don't even have to try to be creative. It's like, it's just part of you. It is Metal Mike. Metal Mike equals creativity. So we're looking forward to all of the creations that you are going to bring us in the coming year.
Awesome. Steve, Wildman, it was a pleasure talking with you guys. I can tell we have a lot in common, and I have a feeling that we're probably going to talk again, so I'm looking forward to it.
All right.
You bet, brother. Take care.
Thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.